Test. Test. 1, 2, 3.
Oh, right, you're not. You have $1
You want to start like going in here? We'll have whoever is. I'll give like a brief introduction. Then yeah, we just want to sit around. Yeah, the presenters will just be up here. We can move this table if we want.
We can go whenever.
Or you can take this around the table, so you'll have a big stand. That's the sound.
Good.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, how is it going to work? My phone is your microphone.
Your phone?
Yeah. So, yeah, how to do a little bit of computer magic to get this to work and some last minute changes. Yeah, so you'll just have your presentation up here. I would advise, like, I've got it set up to where as long as you speak loud and clear, it'll pick you up as long as you're kind of close. It's weird to hear yourself speaking. Yeah, so if you just, like, maybe one of you over here or two of you over here and the other two on this side, so that way they can see the screen. That'd be great. Yeah. So I'm going to go send out the bat signal. So so that's an important note. Each group will need one person to connect their laptop, and you'll just manually, I've got it set up where whatever computer is connected to here will be live streamed. So you'll just like swap out and just whoever has an HDMI, and if you don't have a computer with an HDMI, then just borrow one from somebody else, just email the presentation to each other. But does everybody have, or does each group have at least one laptop with an HDMI cable? Does yours have HDMI?
I've got one.
Yours does, good. Do you have HDMI?
Yeah,
you have a Pro, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So you have an HDMI as well. Perfect.
You got the IEEE on the back.
So I'm going to get the
yeah, of course. Wait, you do? Yeah, so like yeah. Wait, how'd you know?
It's in every color.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The Institute of Electricity.
No, it's not.
Wait, what?
Wait, actually, I need to check what IEEE is.
What is it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I presented at one of the conferences for our paper.
No, I want to do this.
Well, till then it is specific.
Alright.
And just like bear in mind during the presentations, like it's going to pick up everything in the room, so please just be like super quiet while the people are presenting. Okay? Good.
I should have brought my phone.
Okay, so we're gonna start now. It's live, so yeah. Just right here. Just goes. Yeah. This is the microphone. So yeah, no problem. Yeah. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the TGP Capstone presentations. Over the past week, our students from all over have been working on entrepreneurial solutions to a sustainable development problem. So they'll each have 15 minutes to present their ideas, and then 5 to 10 minutes of questions afterwards. Yeah, so let's see what they have to say. Okay.
Thank you, Dan, for the nice introduction. I'm not trying to get in the way here. All right. Hello, everyone. Our product for the Capstone Project will be the Hydro Ball. Okay, so here is a map for our presentation. You can kind of just take a look at it now. All right, a little bit about us.
My name is Liam. I'm from San Diego. I go to San Diego State University, and I'm studying environmental science.
I'm Jack. I go to Penn State University. I'm from Long Island, New York, and I'm studying energy, business, and finance.
Hello, my name is Aaron Cordero, and I am from Clearwater, Florida. I go to the University of Tampa, Florida, at the University of South Florida, and I am also studying environmental science.
Hi, I'm Joaquin. I'm from South Florida. I go to the University of Central Florida, and I'm studying electrical engineering.
All right, so our vision for this product is to collect accurate river data and to increase clean water supply in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Also, we envision that our product makes hydroelectric research easier and easily accessible for the people in Africa. All right, our golden circle, first off with the why. We want to promote and support clean energy with hydroelectric. We also want clean water for drinking and infrastructure development in lower income areas. Next, our how. Our devices will be dropped into the river to test each characteristic and to monitor our data. Lastly, our what. Our anchored aluminum ball that automatically collects data and funnels it all to our website for customers to easily access it and monitor and check their stats.
How it will work. So we would take about a soccer ball sized ball made out of aluminum and silicone, aluminum to strengthen it and silicone for it to float, and then anchor it into a river, and then through a slit in the ball, water will go through, and we will test this water with a multi-parameter sond, which collects pH levels, water turbidity, and like dissolved oxygen and other chemicals in it. And it will take this data and with the Raspberry Pi transmit it to our website, and so the people looking at it will see what they need to do to improve the water or any of the data to add certain intervals. So consistent data.
The multi-parameter sond is a compact multifunctional tool, or it has other names, including just a water quality meter. As mentioned, it measures pH, temperature, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, as well as other toxins in the water, possible toxins in the water. And the whole purpose of the hydro ball here is to automate this multi-parameter sond and to decrease the amount of human labor and time needed to conduct this test. For the SDGs, or Sustainable Development Goals, you can see the 6 displayed here. Obviously, the biggest one we just mentioned in the river is clean water and sanitation, as well as life below water. The main tests of the multi-parameter water meter, such as the pH and humidity, contribute to the actual water quality. We were able to see if there is too much dissolved oxygen, too little dissolved oxygen for fish life and wildlife in general, as well as providing the data needed to know if humans can safely consume the water. As far as affordable and clean energy, it ties right into the industry innovation and infrastructure goal for the hydroelectric power plants that we are trying to supply the data to. As far as climate action, we want to sustainably source all of this products or parts for the product, and you will hear later from my colleague about the decent work and economic growth, about the grant program we have created to help create jobs, and it ties back into clean water and sanitation costs as well.
All right, now for segments and channels. So for the beneficiary, first we have life below water. Obviously, the animals and wildlife underwater are going to be able to have safer water with dissolved oxygen. Another thing is the local people in Africa. For example, we'll be creating jobs with the hydroelectric facilities, and when they're being constructed, also for their drinking water, it will be increased. So the customers, we have financial institutions, companies that study or are involved with water quality and clean energy in the Democratic Republic of Congo will try to buy this product. Next, our channels, we have an email newsletter and the Hydroball website. So basically, this is going to show our development process as well as new hardware for the future, and also success stories that we've had in the past, especially in Africa, and efficient use of our product.
So key resources and activities. As previously mentioned, we will be using a multi-parameter song to collect data about the water. The materials to build the ball, which is silicone and aluminum, silicone to float, aluminum for strength, and computer components, which include Raspberry Pi, which is used to collect data and transmit it to our website, and also wires and batteries in order to keep the Raspberry Pi running. For the activities, we're going to find water depth and velocity, which is very important for building the hydroelectric power. Testing pH, turbidity, dissolved oxygen temperature, which is also one of our goals to improve the water quality in an area. And these are our partners and key stakeholders. Floodwater, which is a charity that works to clean the water in sub-Saharan Africa. Generosity.org, which is also for clean water, but they work all across the African continent. United Nations UN Water, which, like United Nations, they work across the world, but we can also use them to help fund us from the charity that also runs them. Off the ball, they're based in Sweden, and they manufacture parts for hydroelectric dams, so they might want to sell to companies that build the dams in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And Dan, who signed a contract to give us $3 to $4.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
I didn't sign anything. This perjury.
As for our cost structure, some of the obvious biggest expenditures would be the parts that are here. You can see listed the individual cost for a single unit of those. Here is the Raspberry Pi, individual Raspberry Pi computer. We estimated that, of course, as far as the galvanized chain anchor, it depends on the river how long of an anchor you would need. So we estimated around 50-pound shipment, and we calculated that would roughly be from Florida to the DRC, would be around $30 consistently. For laborers, any workers there to install it, we just decided on a flat rate of $20 an hour for a standard employee. And as we travel down here, again, from Florida, we chose that as our headquarters. $700 a one-way ticket to the DRC just to start up. And of course, as the business grows, so does the pricing and cost to it. So as business rises, so does the amount of parts needed, but to counterbalance this, wholesale purchases for parts such as, especially aluminum and silicone, and also wires and battery holder, they become cheaper the more you buy. So that counterbalances needing to buy more.
So, for our value proposition, for our beneficiaries, the local communities, bringing low-cost data collection is one of our main goals. We hope that we can reduce the amount of manpower and the price of testing for local water supplies. We also hope that we can use that lower testing threshold to increase the water resources, especially for drinking, irrigation, and power generation. For our customers, those buying the product directly, we hope that we can, again, reduce manpower requirements. We won't have to have people testing every day. We can provide that data in a long stream. We can also move away from individual testing sites. We can have potentially multiple staged along river, and as will be mentioned later, we will also have a transmission function. For revenue, we are hoping to partner with financial institutions such as the European Investment Bank, who has a long track record of doing good work in low-income countries. Partnering with green-focused companies. We also hope to partner with charities such as Water.org, which does a lot of installation services for low-income communities, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. We hope that we can especially partner with them working in our grant program. With logistics being located in Florida, we can hopefully capitalize on the large American industrial base. We can lower costs because we hope to be sourcing most of our parts from within the country itself. And by sourcing everything, hopefully, within the country, we can reduce carbon emissions by potentially not shipping from carbon-heavy markets, China, for example. By incorporating in the U.S. as well, under IRS rules, we can incorporate as a 501c corporation, which, long story short, it's a charity. That will be all of our profits, as it says down here. All of our extra profits will be that are not used within the company itself will be focused on our grant program. And for surplus, so of our profits, everything that we can possibly funnel into making our product better and to streamlining our production, we will try to do. We will also try and streamline our supply chains, find the best manufacturers that we possibly can for price and for a green environmental focus. And then for our grant program, we will be providing services to the communities that we have installed our hydroball in and those that we deem in need. For example, we hope to start digging wells. We've seen several, especially as mentioned before, Water.org. They've done good work there. All excess profits, as I said before, will go to our grant.
As for metrics for success, we want to have created a number of standards for us to reach in order to call ourselves a successful business and a successful idea. We want to have an increased count of rivers with accurate data in the DRC and potentially in other areas, but our focus is the DRC. An increased number of hydroelectric facilities in lower income areas. We contribute to this by supplying consistent integral data to those hydroelectric facility companies. Decreased cost of energy, which ties directly into that, and increased water supply to communities. Again, it's all about supplying the data to the people that need the data to change the river quality to make it a more sustainable and better water quality in rivers.
So for our barriers to success, so there are several issues we may face, starting with our financials. We will need large amounts of capital, especially to ramp up production, so we will have to rely on large financial institutions, as mentioned before. This may be difficult. We may have to provide at least a more fleshed out business plan. And we will also hope to have a more streamlined regulatory framework so we can deploy in these countries and build in the United States as easily as possible with the least amount of red tape. That way we can make everyone's lives easier. For our logistical issues, remote access via the Raspberry Pi is completely untested in this device. We don't know if it will be able to transmit, especially for long distances, and we lack connection and trust with the communities we'll be operating in. We hope to partner with these charities that have networks there, but that is as of yet unrealized. And for our environmental and ethical considerations, we hope to use aluminum in our case. We don't want to rely on plastics. We want to make sure that we have the least impact possible, especially because we're already disturbing the river by installing it directly. We hope to partner with green manufacturers. IBM, for an example, they have done great work at reducing their emissions and especially shortening their supply chains. We hope, again, ethically minded supply chain, working with manufacturers that have good records in that regard, working well with people, having low pollution levels across their operations. And we need to vet and partner with charities, vet the people coming in for our grant program, make sure that they are in need and that the funds are being used wisely. and so that we can use networks to get to the people truly in need.
For the sustainability complex, we focus and we are focusing on the national state level. And as I mentioned before, the country that we're focusing on is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which they have the largest freshwater resource in Africa, but they have extremely limited access to drinking water.
This is our overall business model. So our key resources include the sun, the bulk, components, activities being test for water, quality velocity, with the goal in mind to create hydropower and water quality. The interventions are the physical product anchored in the river. The segments for the beneficiaries, the sea life local people, and the customer are financial institutions. Value proposition, our beneficiary is low cost and will provide resources. The impacts are grants and wells. And the customer value proposition is lower manpower through automation. Our channels are the newsletter and website. The partners and key stakeholders of charities, organizations, and hydroelectric companies, with the cost structure being building a product and the cost increasing as the scale increases. Our surplus will go to integrating tech and grants, with the revenue being a quarter donations and the rest from sales.
These are our references, just the URLs, and that is the end. Now open it to questions.
Thank you.
Good job. Just a couple questions, specifically about the hydro ball to start. You say that it's like sort of an improvement over this past technology, and in that people don't have to be there to collect the data as much. Is it like installed in the river, and how do you do that exactly? Or how do you plan on doing that?
It will be, as we mentioned before with the chain, it will be anchored into the riverbed itself. It will float there for a designated period of time and transmit periodically. The customer can set their interval of data collection. That way it can be basically left in the river for as long as needed to collect data without having someone to come out and check the water main.
There still is necessary, let's say, human labor to replace batteries at certain points, but
Less, too.
It's less time than if you were to send someone, let's say, someone wanted to have a weekly update every Sunday morning about the water quality, pH in the river. It's a lot easier with the hydro than to send somebody, pay them for their time and the hard work to go 52 times a year, every Sunday in a year, to use the multi-brand respond in their hand.
Okay, sounds good. And why did you decide on aluminum? Because although it is a good metal to limit rust, it is one of the softer metals, and this makes it like pretty bendable. And like, how do you think that that's going to like affect the life cycle? What do you think the life cycle of this hydro ball is, depending on river turbulence? Like, you say you can install it and just leave it there, but like aluminum is not the most sturdy metal. Like, how long do you think you can leave it there without it sounds like one crack and then it's entirely compromised, like the Raspberry Pi.
I was going to say, we intend to have, unfortunately not mentioned in the presentation, a rubber liner within the ball itself, keeping watertight silicons on the seals so that the probe can actually access the water, but a rubber liner to keep the sound. Also, we hope to have it, especially since the rivers in the Congo tend to be quite shallow and the flow doesn't tend to be very fast. We hope that we can set it at a certain level, so that way, no matter which way the river ends up flowing, if water flows tend to change, it won't be hitting the bottom. Obviously, we can't avoid something like stick or rock or something smashing into it. That's an unfortunate casualty, but we hope that we can pick a good spot within a certain area that we've deemed sort of safe from those floating hazards and keep it from potentially bouncing off the riverbed itself. Aluminum, again, not, as you said, not the strongest metal, but we decided steel was really not the best answer, as it does need to float and float very consistently in a certain spot, plus if it's very heavy, then shipping increases, production costs increase, and it could have trouble with, again, shifting river flows, smashing into the riverbed. That would be far worse in my opinion.
Also, to keep up the sustainable business model, we, of course, it's only with plastic only increase microplastics and pollutants in the river itself. But about the checking up on the ball, would say, I would estimate around quarterly, every 3 months to check on how it's doing. But people would also know, the company would also know if there's an issue, and we would know if there's an issue with it, because the data at the set intervals would no longer be being transmitted or as it received as well. So if there's an obvious issue that it's not working, I mean, it can break open for sure, but I highly doubt these anchors coming out simply because of the whole breaking. And also partnering with local charities and the local people, we can ask them about their expertise. Of course, we're just coming in and setting it up, or having them set it up. They can ask their advice on where's the best place to install this in their own rooms.
Cool. So just curious, you mentioned that your headquarters would be in Florida. Is there like a policy incentive? Why it would be like advantageous to be in Florida? Or like why did you choose that for like a headquarters?
2 out of 4 of us are 30, so we make sense.
Yeah.
Also, the distance is the shortest of all states from Florida to the DRC, so we just thought that would be the optimal location, but honestly, we didn't even factor that. That was kind of just because of the Florida happy accident. Happy accident.
Yeah. And then sort of following up on that, did you mention why specifically for the DRC?
Yeah.
The largest water resource in all of Africa, and 70%, if memory serves, of people lack stable and safe drinking water.
It's only 52% of the water is clean and drinkable when it has the largest resource, which doesn't seem very fair, and we just thought it would be good to establish our product in that specific country.
Since, I mean, you're having it based, but your headquarters in the United States, would you like consider, like, why not use this in the States as well?
Absolutely. It was more of a direct line to potentially the most affected communities. Absolutely, we could bring it to the U.S. We just hope to help those, as we said with the grant program, sort of the idea of the most in need as we possibly can find.
Cool.
Also, it would be a good area to find and have a good base to test the product and to get more, build our resume, our product resume per se, about it, because like others have mentioned, this is an untapped area.
I was gonna say, like, and also as we scale up, we can sell to people in the United States and Europe if they want to do personal tests.
Okay. Sounds good. Does anybody else have any burning questions? Okay.
All right, Brandon.
I'm not going to grill you, but I have 2 questions.
Okay.
So the first is, in your cost slide, there's 2 main things that stood out. One was like, you have like at least $1,500 in per unit costs, and all the inputs come from around the world. And then Trump just instituted like tariffs on the vast majority of the stuff we're talking about. And on top of that, you know, the Dominican Republic, the DRC is like in the middle of a civil war, and so like the shipping costs is priced in like $50 per. You know, DRC is a landlocked country in the middle of Africa in civil war, so it will not be $50. It'll probably be more than $50. So how would you think about scale when you think about those tariffs and that price and those input costs?
So our strategy there is the internationally recognized government of the Congo does control, especially the largest strip at the mouth of the river itself. So we would hope to first establish there. Given the political changes in the country, you're absolutely correct. It is very hard to determine where would be a good site. There could be a lot of turbulence there. The hope was we are such a small impact on a community that at a certain point we could sort of fly under the radar, so to speak. Not necessarily sneaking around the war zone, nothing like that. We're not fighting battles. but hoping to implement wherever at all possible. And for the per unit cost, you are right, it is very spread out, and we did say that is our goal to move towards a local supply chain. Unfortunately, we just don't have that data at the moment. That was not something that we had the time to sort of look into, find all the manufacturers that we possibly could in the US. But you are right, at the beginning, it is going to be extremely expensive to bring these things in, but we're hoping that, especially with investment from the banks and especially charities, that we can move towards a more streamlined supply chain and lower that per unit cost. And especially with these tariffs, it may change. We may see some electronics manufacturing, especially, come back to the United States. So we may see an increase in that industry capabilities. We may be able to capitalize, and these are all hypotheticals, but as best I can, try and move towards.
Good answer. And then my second one, so the customer slide, when I think about like somebody who would buy this, the first thing that is popping to my mind is like a financial institution, because the people buying it are the people developing, or at least doing studies for the development of the actual hydropower plant. So when you thought about customers, was there anybody else that you could possibly sell this product to?
Does someone else want to answer that?
Can we go back to the sustainability component? So
Nope.
yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily, it's not like companies name on this drawing, but you can say that someone, a person at every level of this drawing would purchase it. I mean, it can be used for an individual. On the very bottom of the triangle, individual scientists, personal study, a household in the backyard. I mean, if someone wants to know what their local stream is like, I mean, and then going up, I mean, communities, neighborhoods, and cities. I don't have the exact company names for you or corporations or anything like that. Again, lack of research on that department, but I strongly do believe there is a customer in every single category on this, and of course, if you give us a time limit, eventually we can get up to global. I mean, on the slide we are targeting the country level, the national level, but for exact companies, I cannot speak for that, but I do believe that there is a market for it at sort of every level.
Just a comment from the online audience. This product could be sold to many research facilities that are actively testing water quality in rivers, lakes, oceans, etc. is something that happens like everywhere. So I think like absolutely like this fits all over that. Yeah, over that triangle. Yeah. Cool. Any further questions? No? Well, good job. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Great questions. Yeah, really good. Yeah.
What do you think?
And just if you can have like a timer up there as well.
We got one.
Because mine is on microphone right now. Thanks.
I like the answer.
Yeah, just start whenever.
everyone. We are SDAN, Sustainable Development and Agricultural Lands and Networking, and we're here today to talk about our business plan.
So I'm Grace. I go to the University of British Columbia and I study environmental science.
I am Sophia. I go to Penn State University and I study geoscience.
I'm Jules. I go to Warren Wilson College and I study sustainable agriculture.
I'm Minka, and I go to San Diego State University and I study environmental science. This is what we'll cover in our presentation.
Okay, first is our golden circle. Our why is that the United States needs more investments in sustainable energy. The U.S. is very reliant on fossil fuels, which are non-renewable and have lots of emissions. Additionally, farmers in the United States are getting older. The average age of a farmer in Montana is 58 to 82 years, so we have people looking to sell land. Our how is we're going to come in and assess farms to see if solar energy is suitable on their lands. We're going to consult with the farmers on what the best course of action is with what they should do with their land. We want to help prevent farmers from getting taken advantage of, which tends to happen by big companies. So we're hoping to come in, give them a nice option. Speak up, I can do that.
Thanks.
Okay, our what is we're going to install small solar-powered microgrids in rural areas of Montana to supply renewable energy.
Okay, so then we have our sustainability complex. So it covers a couple of categories here. We're going to start at the individual level, which is that farmers can just make more sustainable choices about what goes on their land, and that farmers can generate a stable and sustainable income versus having people come and drill oil wells on their land, which doesn't last forever, unlike the sun, which will be here as long as we are. So then moving up a level to community and neighborhood, the goal is to provide energy to kind of rural farming areas in Montana and increase long-term energy security in those areas. And with that, we'll also lower energy costs there and lower the emissions. And then expanding even further up to the city level, eventually our goal is to expand far enough that we can begin powering some grids in the city, and this will expand the green energy industry in Montana as well and provide jobs.
Okay, so these are some of the sustainable development goals that we hit. First is affordable and clean energy. The implementation of renewable energy will provide affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy in these rural communities. Using the sun's energy will decrease dependence on fossil fuels, which they rely on heavily in these communities. And it will also ensure cost-effective energy. Second is decent work and economic growth. So our company will provide a lot of new job opportunities for people in these areas, such as construction, maintenance, and operations. And the creation of these jobs will help stabilize the local economies and will provide economic growth for them. We will also be committed to safe, healthy, and inclusive work environments for all of our employees. Third is sustainable cities and communities. So we'll be helping them transition to renewable energy and stop being reliant on fossil fuels and move towards a more sustainable and green future. And finally is climate action. We will be directly combating climate change by decreasing our reliance on fossil fuels and moving towards solar energy.
This is our business model canvas. It just walks through each step of our business and what we're going to be doing, what it's about. We're going more into depth on all of these in the next slides.
We're going to start off with the key resources and activities. So starting with resources, first of all, we need some interested landowners. So we need some farmers who are looking to leasing their land for sustainable energy and to put some solar panels on their farmland. We are also wanting to develop a website so we can reach landowners all across the state of Montana because they are very spread out. And also a lot of evaluating for solar energy can be done online, and this will make it easier and less expensive than us sending a person there for multiple days. We'll need a business loan. Obviously, we're looking at the Small Business Association loan from the U.S. And we'll need some land assessors that are certified in the state of Montana. And then our activities are basically developing solar power stations on private land across the state of Montana.
All right, so the closest stakeholder that we will be working with are the farmers themselves. We want them to feel like they're being listened to and cared about throughout the entire process. We want them to be as educated as possible, so we will give them access to the Colorado Agrivoltaic Learning Center database, which has a free 90-minute course every month for them to kind of get as educated as they can. Also, there's a solar farm in Colorado called Jax, which is kind of like a research farm facility, and Colorado has a similar kind of climate and farmland as Montana, so they can learn from how this farm has been able to successfully grow different crops. It's a research institution, so they have attempted to grow a lot of different crops with an 83% success rate so far of all the different crops that are being grown simultaneously with solar panels. And then we will be trying to work with the Nature Conservancy, which currently has this map which shows different habitats for like endangered species, so we wouldn't want to build on places that would affect different like birds and grazing animals. So how we will get connected to the different farmers is we will look on the Montana Land Source initially, which has all available farmland for purchase, and try to get in touch with different farmers that we think their land would be appropriate for solar. After we have formed a relationship, we can start moving forward with that assessment on their land. And then we will be closely working with the National Farmers Union, which is working on enhancing economic well-being of all farmers. And in August, the four of us and Dan will be traveling to Grand Falls, Montana, where we will be attending a conference on renewable energy. Yeah. Thanks, Dan, for bringing this thing.
All these people are volunteering for things that I didn't agree to.
You agreed, you just don't remember.
Okay.
Okay, so our segments, the first one is the beneficiaries, so that being the farmers and landowners who want to lease the land in the local communities. This is beneficial for them because it is helping prevent urbanization and industrialization in the area, because that tends to ruin the landscape, mess with it. So we're able to help preserve more, and additionally, we are helping reduce the emissions in the area, so it's like things like improving air quality, like stuff like that. We can help by having your solar panels instead of like an alternative urbanization. And then our customer is the people buying the energy we're producing. We can't install the solar panels and produce energy just to do it. We need someone to be buying it. So that's also again going to be a lot of the local communities and the farmers. So they are benefiting from it, but they are also paying for the energy that we produce.
Okay, so we are a service that helps farmers transition their land into green energy hubs. We are doing so by giving them a choice of what they can do with their land that they no longer use or that they no longer want. And we are valuable because we are introducing renewable energy in rural communities that are usually very reliant on coal and fossil fuels. And by putting renewables on these lands, it's a lot better for the ecosystems. Urbanization is really bad for the environment, and with that, the farmers would no longer be able to use their lands for agriculture or for crops. But renewables such as solar can coexist with the environment and won't destroy the land.
All right, so a big thing that farmers will be getting out of it is that they will be working with us the entire process, and so they can kind of see how the land is being changed and help tell us like what they feel about it. The farmers will also have increased economic opportunity from it because we will be renting the land so that we can put up solar panels. And in Montana, there is about 58.1 million acres of farmland. That's the second most in the U.S. In the U.S., there's a total of 43% of the land is farmland, which means that there's a lot of land that could be used for renewable energy. The importance of this is that solar power takes up 10 times more space than fossil fuels. So in order for these things to kind of like exist, coincide, it's important that we can turn some farms into working land that is also being used for renewable energy. Currently, I think a lot of farmers have the belief that renewable energy companies are like a competitor, so they're a little bit timid towards it. Yeah, so then we're going to start looking into this new, well not new, but it's kind of just started in the US. It's been around for a long time, but it kind of just started gaining momentum in 2020. In order for us to reach a net zero carbon emissions in the US, we need to have 250,000 acres for solar. And as you can see from these images, we can be using the land for farming as well as renewable energy. It's actually helpful for the plants because the increased shade provides better retention for carbon and water. And then when it comes to taking care of the solar panels, you have to consistently like wash them to make sure that the most amount of sun is being captured, and this also irrigates the plants, as well as there's less need for like mowing underneath them because the land is either being taken care of or there's livestock that's grazing, so it's less time spent just on maintenance.
Okay, and now here's our cost structure. So we have 4 things that are going to be like our primary costs. The first being the land assessments. We can't just build solar panels without assessing the land. The price of the land assessments can vary based on how much acreage we're working with, but we don't expect it to be any more than $400 per assessment. Next is our rent to the farmers. We are primarily going to be leasing their land. And the U.S. average for farm land lease is about $36 a month per acre. So that's what we expect to work with, and Grace is going to go more into detail on that later. We're also going to need permits. You can't just build these things without permits, but unfortunately, the permit prices are hard to calculate because it can vary based on, like, you have your statewide permits, and then like municipality permits, your city permits, your town permits. So those prices are hard to get an estimate of. And then we have our installation of solar panels, which is probably our most expensive part. It is 98 cents per watt to build a solar farm, and solar farms tend to be quite big, so that 98 cents adds up very quickly.
Okay, so our main source of income will be directly from our customers that buy our solar electricity from our microgrids, and it's difficult to know exactly how much we're going to be making annually because that depends on how many customers we have and how much land we have and how much we're operating on. But typically 1 megawatt of a 1 megawatt solar farm, which is 4 to 5 acres, can generate about $100,000 annually. But this can shift to as little as $70,000 and as much as $150,000. We are unfortunately not expecting to see much profit in the first couple of years, which Grace will go over in the next slide. But if we do see surplus or increased revenue, we plan on expanding. We're starting small scale in Montana, but we plan to invest into more landowners and produce more grids and expand to more agricultural states to help them implement renewable energy as well.
Okay, so next we looked at, we are going to build a 1 megawatt solar farm in Montana. What is that going to look like? Well, the cost to build, as we went over, is 98 cents a watt. So it's going to cost about $1 billion. Now the annual revenue from this, as Nick touched on, is give or take $100,000. Now operating costs on this is going to be about $15,000 to $20,000, and we're going to give a cut to the landowner, which is 2.5% of our annual revenue, which is about $2,500. Now, the land cost of this, as Nick has said, is about 4 to 5 acres to put this up on, which at Montana's current monthly average of $36 an acre monthly, it'll be about $2,100 annually, which leaves our net annual revenue at $65,000 to about $75,000 a year. Now, unfortunately, since this is such an expensive plant, this means we start to generate profit after 13 to 14 years, but since lifespan of solar panels is 25 to 30 years, there is 12 to 18 of profit generating years. Now, to achieve this, we will need not only loans from the bank, but ideally like grants from the U.S. Department of Energy and investors, because otherwise it will not be as feasible. Any questions?
Joe? got a couple questions. First, can you back up to that case study? So is that the landowner, are you paying that $2,160 to the landowner as rent?
Yes.
We pay them like rent here. Yeah, this is the rent on the 4 to 5 acres that we're using to put the solar farm on, and then cut to the landowner was like to cut them in on the energy profits as
Okay.
well.
So the landowner gets like $4,700 a year for 4 to 5 acres. Do you have any like comparison to like how much they could, did you do any research into like how much like 4 to 5 acres of land, like how much that would generate to the farmer just as like farmland or as like the agrovoltaic stuff? Any comparison? Because, I mean, that seems quite, that seems like the farmer's not getting a whole lot of land or a lot of money out of that.
Well, ideally they would be able to grow with the solar panel, like
Okay.
it's the agrovoltaic kind of method there.
Okay.
So, I mean, ideally they wouldn't be losing too much of their crop profit that is already there. And
Yeah. So we have a solar expert asking saying that having a 1 megawatt solar farm would probably be unrealistic because that's roughly like 4,000 solar panels. So do you think like scaling this back a bit would be more feasible?
yeah, for sure, we could start at the smaller because, I mean, when you look at how much money you need to build this, how much the interest would be on that loan, I mean, you really don't make any money, so scaling it back would definitely be probably the smartest option, like start small and then build bigger farms as the company grows bigger.
The farm that we were looking at in Colorado, they had around 3,700, I believe, solar panels, and they were able to generate enough electricity to power 300 homes. And this was only on a 24-acre farm. So if we're scaling up to like the size of like some of these Montana ranches, where you're only using a small portion and they have all the rest of it, and you're able to power 300 homes in a community, they would see that probably as a valuable asset.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Have you also researched? Have you researched what type of like solar cell would be best for these type of installations? Like for example, like the tandem solar cells typically provide like highest efficiency, but like polysilicon typically have like a lower cost. So like what kind of solar cells were you thinking about for these installations?
Probably like lower cost, just because cost is probably the biggest barrier to entry right now and like actually implementing this. And I mean, maybe that could change.
And so also back to the payback to the farmers, they rent out your land, they rent out their land to your company. So do they then also have to pay for the energy received through the solar farm as well? Like, so it's like you pay them rent, but you own their energy.
No, they'd be getting a portion of it.
So that they get a portion of the energy. Okay. Okay. Do you think that there's like other incentives for the farmers that your product or your service could provide? Because again, that like $4,600, $4,700 total, it seems like a little low. Yeah. So any other like incentives that you think would be good for the project?
Well, like, as we mentioned, like, they're getting pretty old as the national average is getting older, because a lot of the young people tend to move to cities. So it's kind of like, if you're getting older, you maybe can't farm all your 40 acres of land. but you don't necessarily want to sell it off to become developments, just like a source of income as you're getting older, or as you're maybe going to pass it down to your younger generation who lives in cities and is not going to be there all the time to be farming the land and constantly monitoring.
Also, I think in small communities, they have like a strong connection to their neighbors, and they would rather have their neighbors be receiving cheaper energy and have beautiful land still preserved than have like suburban development kind of like destroy their whole community that they've lived in for generations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Just another like side note that solar cells typically have a decreased life cycle, only like 10 to 15 years due to environmental effects, just from the solar expert. Another note, have you looked into the idea of sun tracking solar cells for your project? Future research?
We kind of toned into solar this morning. So.
Oh yeah. Cool. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Any other questions? Shoot.
So you're not selling the power to farms, right? You're just selling the power that you generate to the community or
To the grid.
customers?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
I didn't have any questions.
Great. Awesome enough. Great.
That's, I take ownership.
Yeah, they can see it.
Cool. Do you have a timer set?
No, I will do it.
Thanks. Cool. All right.
Okay, ready?
Yep. So, hi, my name is Brandon. I'm a member of the Caribbean Geothermal Development Company. Today we're going to be pitching a 150 megawatt geothermal project in Dominica, the island of Dominica. So we'll just go over an overview. First, we're going to be, introducing ourselves and introducing the team, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of what the project actually is. So we'll start off with site selection, which Peter will talk about. Then we'll get into kind of some stakeholders that are in the process, as well as public opinion of geothermal energy within Dominica. Next, we're going to be talking about our afforestation as a means for carbon sequestration proposal, which Alex will talk about. And then finally, I'll be talking about the cost structure, the financing, commercialization through an LCOE model that we built. Also, just as a preliminary thing, there's a lot of information on these slides, and we're not going to get to all of it, so the Q&A would be helpful to get to all of the information. Now, first I'll introduce myself. My name is Brandon. I recently graduated from Emory University last year with a finance and economics degree, and I currently work at GE Vernova in their energy financial services group.
And hi, my name is Peter, and I am currently a student at the Pennsylvania State University, and I study geography and minor in energy business and finances.
Hi guys, my name is Alex. I am a third year at San Diego State University, and I am studying sustainability.
My name is Kaj Cortina. I am a student at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I'm working on a bachelor's in environmental science with a minor in business.
Our sustainable development goals consist of climate action, good health and well-being, responsible consumption and production, life on land, industry, innovation, and infrastructure, reduced inequalities, affordable and clean energy, and lastly, partnerships for the goals.
So what is it? There's really three main components of our proposal. The first is the 150 megawatt geothermal facility in Dominica. We expect a 30-year useful life, which is helpful for our LCOE model. The second thing is our afforestation as a means for carbon capture and sequestration, which is not vital to the project, but we're thinking about the feasibility of it for this project. And then the third thing is possibly the implementation of different tax credit structures by the government of Dominica in order to increase and incentivize the development of geothermal energy within the country. So there are two structures. The first is a 45Q structure, and the second is a ITC structure. And why is this important? So there's two main reasons why it's important. The first is largely the fact that 90% of the electricity generation within Dominica comes through the burning of fossil fuels. It's actually imported energy. We think that the utilization and implementation of a geothermal energy facility will allow for greater utilization of geothermal renewable energy every day. And then the second portion is, most of the economic diversity in Dominica is really consolidated into two industries. The first is agriculture, and the second is tourism. And that's kind of led to poverty rates of 29% within the island and unemployment rates of 13% within the island. We believe that the generation of blue power, because the focus is on blue power as opposed to just geothermal power, might incentivize two types of investment. Investment from manufacturing facilities that want to take advantage of this blue power within Dominica, which would garner job growth. And the other side would be like hyperscalers or data centers who would be willing to pay a premium for that blue power. So it would greatly diversify the economy within the country.
So now we'll talk about how we actually implement this because it's quite a large undertaking. So let's start off with a bit of information about Dominica. And as we can see that Dominica itself is a volcanic island and has potential for geothermal energy of up to 120 megawatts of energy that can be produced. Past research has been found that there is natural resources that can be used to exploit and utilize this energy from researchers in 1977. And however, we have highly limited data that can be found online, and so this basically implies that we need to go down there to actually research and figure out specific geothermal chemistry in the specific site of Dominica, and also possibly look at further buffering of how close or how far we need to be within volcanic activities, etc. And this might drive up the cost due to drilling wells. And so for method and implementation, we first have to map out and visualize where exactly are volcanic islands situated in for the Caribbean seas. And so once we've figured that out, we can then map local areas of aggregated volcanic activity, which can help us decide which areas we can utilize to exploit this power. So for site selection, we have right here, we can see all the aggregated volcanic activities that's across the Caribbean Ocean, and from this we can see that Dominica here has a relatively high amount of volcanic activity. This is aggregated data, so it won't show every single volcano on the island, but given the size and also the number of activity that we have here, we can see that it is quite a lot compared to the other islands, given the landmass that it has. And then from here, we can see that there's a positive spatial autocorrelation, or like a clustering over here in the bottom area of Dominica, and we figured that this would probably be the best area where it's in between Roseo Valley, which can be found between the Laudat, Trafalgar, and Walton Waven communities, so this can possibly supply energy for the local community and also for other potential customers.
So some of our key partners and stakeholders would be obviously the government bodies on Dominica, so that's Dominica Geothermal Development Company, Environmental Coordinating Unit, ECU, Dominica Physical Planning Division, and Dominica's Forest, Wildlife, and Parks Division. Other stakeholders would be the national parks there, Sulphur Springs, and Trafalgar Falls. Obviously, of course, the residents in the area will be impacted as well, but in Wilson and Popular Wilderness Treated Tropical Gardens is also a popular tourist destination. So, residents feel that these projects don't share enough details with the communities. They fear that they'll be excluded from the decision-making process. They're also concerned with water contamination and toxic gas that can come from drilling the well. The national parks in this area are concerned with that drilling this will affect the ecosystems and forests. They're also concerned that a big geothermal plant will kind of scare away some tourists and increase seismic activity. We can't address all these concerns, but we can do a few things. We could do social and environmental impact assessments so we know exactly how we will affect these people. We could also, of course, we also need to actively manage and monitor our geothermal reservoirs just to make sure there's no leaks, that sort of thing. Avoid scarring during while we're creating this, just to keep these tourist destinations nice and beautiful. Lay out a clear plan, and really just engage the community, keep them involved, hopefully try to quell most of their fears, and be careful with our site selection. The government opinion, so Dominica's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Dr. Vincent Zinc, claims geothermal energy can transform the nation's energy sector and the economy by reducing electrical costs, achieving 100% renewable energy by 2030. You see some other benefits there as well.
So to get into the next part is the carbon offsets. With any activity that creates emissions, it's important to highlight the fact that geothermal energy creates less carbon emissions than its fossil fuel and coal counterparts. And the end goal of this is for our power plant to be completely carbon neutral. The system we put in place is quite simply the easiest way to combat carbon emissions, planting trees in Dominica, as well as native vegetation. This will ensure biodiversity and make sure no one is displaced because of this new implement on their land. Overall, Dominica is relatively small, only 750 kilometers squared in width. And in order to keep the over carbon neutral plan, we would have to plant trees 20 years beforehand. This is also just an example of an African baobab tree. We can't use these because they're so large, but I just wanted to show like how cool it was. Our key resource, trees. We focused on the banyan tree that was first introduced to Dominica in 1793. This will ensure carbon sequestration. Dominica is home to over 1,000 plant species. Still, in order to sequester all the carbon, we would need 4.5 million trees, and each to sequester 2.6 kilograms of carbon dioxide monthly. And the average tree size is 14,500 square meters. As this isn't feasible, we would already have to grow 275,000 trees to make an impact on the power plant cost at all. This equals to over 5 times the size of Dominica. The key activities are planting vegetation. To determine within the first 20 years of plant life, they absorb an average of 22 pounds of carbon dioxide per year. This is with the assumption that there is an average of 1,000 feet trees planted per hectare in Dominica. To determine the carbon sequestration rate, we are keeping the banyan trees at the forefront, with the infeasible hope that our geothermal plant will function as carbon neutral. The project will be financed and developed by the Bank of the Caribbean, as it has previously financed similar projects. We will also request the help of the World Bank, as it has financed transmission infrastructure in Dominica previously as well. Lastly, an equity ownership stake by the Dominica Geothermal Development Company. And lastly, community engagement. In order to plant all the trees, we will insist on the help of the Dominica community. This will offer community building experience, and hands-on learning that it takes to help enhance the livelihood of an area located near the geothermal plant. This will promote positive thoughts towards geothermal energy and ease the community into transitioning to geothermal.
All right, so there's really two options for transmission. There's off the grid or like off the meter, which would be selling directly to a off-taker. That off-taker would be a manufacturing company or a data center, and we'll go into that later on in the presentation. We largely believe that this mode of financing transmission would probably be financed by the off-taker itself. Data centers, which would be owned by people like Google, are cash rich. They might be willing to purchase blue power and finance this transmission because of our LCOE price. The next side would be trying to finance on-the-grid power through DOMLEC. So DOMLEC is like the utility in Dominica. They provide electricity to households, and it's like people like Dan, for example. They provide electricity to them. It would require a substantial amount of capital investment to build the transmission infrastructure necessary to connect it to the grid. But the World Bank, in a previous project, a project that's currently in development, is 10 megawatts of geothermal energy. That was financed by the World Bank. So essentially there is a possibility for on-the-grid transmission. Next are the potential buyers. As we've discussed, the key focus of the project is blue power, meaning power where you're generating electricity and you're sequestering carbon into the ground. Essentially, off-takers are more willing to pay a premium or a higher price for that electricity if it's blue power to meet emission targets and emission goals. And so that's a key focus, is we kind of want to sell power to hyperscalers, those types of off-takers, data centers. Now, the upside of that is, they're willing to pay a lot of money, which could be really good for a country if they own equity stakes in the development companies. But the downside is hyperscalers don't employ a lot of people. So the direct impact on Dominica would kind of be reduced. It wouldn't be huge reductions in unemployment rates or poverty rates. It'd be the goal of the government to do that. We have more money to do it. Now, the second side is manufacturing. Manufacturing facilities use a lot of electricity, are willing to pay for power, and they employ a lot of people. But they're much less willing to pay for blue power, which means that there might be some environmental risks and considerations if you're not utilizing blue power with geothermal facilities, which do emit CO2 into the atmosphere. Now, this is a kind of a dense slide, and I'm not going to talk about all the assumptions. You can ask questions about the assumptions later on. Really, the only thing I want to talk about is what an LCOE is. An LCOE is a levelized cost of electricity. From a technical sense, in finance, it's like the present value of all the costs that come with developing a project, from capital expenditures to variable costs to fixed costs over the lifetime of the project. And that all is consolidated into one price. That price is like the price that you're going to be selling into power markets to break even. And now, what we're trying to do is compare that price with the price of other blue power developments, which is like thermal energy plants that have carbon capture and sequestration. That's very, very expensive, and their LCOE prices are around $100. So that's what you should be thinking, is our benchmark is $100. We want to be selling power for less than $100. Now, this graph is the LCOE graph. The key thing you should be looking at is without tax credits, it's $71. And you can talk about my assumptions in the Q&A, but without tax credits, it's $71 in each one of our cases. Now, the different tax credits we talked about are an investment tax credit and a 45Q. Now, I'm going to talk about the 45Q in the Q&A. But the investment tax credit is like a 60% discount on construction costs. So we think that this plant is going to cost $450 million to create. So it'd be like a 60% discount on those $450 million at the end of construction, and that's this case. So you see it reduces the price drastically to $49. And that's largely because of timing. If you get a discount earlier on in the life cycle of the power plant, then it has a bigger impact on the price. This final case is our 275,000 tree case, which is our infeasible case. It's really like, if we plant all the trees we want to plant, this is what we can expect the price to be. It's around $70. So you see, it's not really that big of an impact. Now, I'm only going to talk about 3 risks and mitigants. The first risk is really the substantial research and studies that might come with trying to understand the negative externalities of building a geothermal plant in Dominica. The next would largely be the fact that carbon pricing and 45Qs necessitate a carbon market, a market for carbon, which is not really developed. I mean, there's developments in the United States, there's developments in Canada, but since it's not a mature market, then there might be a problem. And then finally, the other substantial risk is the cost of development. It costs $3 to $7 million to drill, to find, to get an understanding of the resource itself, and so that would be a substantial cost. Now, our three mitigants to that is one, concerning the need for carbon markets. There's good news in the United States. In the new reconciliation bill in the House, 45Qs were not touched. There really wasn't a huge impact, which means there's still developments in carbon markets and carbon pricing, so that's a good thing, one good thing from the Trump administration. The second thing is, we were talking about investment tax credits. Those investment tax credits would offset the additional costs that are needed to develop a plant. So like the drilling, the $3 to $7 million per well that you need to drill, those would be offset by ITCs, 60% ITCs. And then finally, since there's already a geothermal plant in development in Dominica, a lot of the studies, at least we assume a lot of the studies have been handled or are in the process of being handled. At least there's a baseline information that we could use for further studies. So maybe the cost of that would be reduced. This is really just our base model canvas. We talked about every component of it already. We're open for questions. And also, we have the sustainability complex. We think really this national, regional, and city area is where we're focused because we're talking about grid-connected power. These are government-backed institutions. And even if we're selling directly to a huge data center, like 150 megawatts is a lot of capacity for this small island. So it would be a government national endeavor. And on top of that, the financing would probably come from the Caribbean Development Bank, which is a regional institution.
Sources?
Yeah, so this is really well researched. I feel like the panel says that like a lot of their questions were already answered going to the slides. But one question that we do have is, since you already mentioned that like the trees and vegetation planting would be difficult and maybe not like feasible like in Dominica to get to like the scale that you would need to fully like compensate for those emissions, would you consider like other carbon capture technology, like carbon fix? Like, is there the right like geochemistry for that?
Yeah. So I can answer that. I'm not really sure about the geochemistry portion of it, but in the basis for all of our assumptions for the carbon pricing came from the lecture we had on the first day, where they asked us, I asked, like, how large is a plant that you worked on and what was the price for it? Mm-hmm. So she said it was $450 million for 150 megawatts. So my assumption was, since building a geothermal plant, already you have these hydrogen sulfide emissions and CO2 emissions, other gases. The assumption was that in building that plant, you factored in sequestration and transportation costs. On top of that, most of my cost assumptions, particularly the variable cost assumption, was based in past blue power projects that I've worked on, and so like. The variable cost of sequestering carbon is usually around $30 per metric ton of carbon emitted, not carbon sequestered. So since I base it on emissions as opposed to like sequestered carbon, that cost is already taken into account.
And also, for like my aspect of it, I really wanted the community to be involved. So planting trees, even though it's not feasible, I did want to get the community involved because I feel like it would help them, or help us promote geothermal energy, and it would help them kind of like be inclined to be like, oh, you know what, maybe this isn't so bad and it could be good for us.
So like so let's say you did want to compensate for all of the emissions from this plant with tree planting. We know that you can't do it in Dominica because there's like physically not enough space. But like, is there somewhere where you, like somewhere else, like where you would like purchase land and put a bunch of trees? Like, what would you do if like in another like test case where you were saying like, hey, we want to fully compensate with trees, where would you put those trees and why?
Oh my gosh, like surrounding Dominica probably, and like the islands that surround it, and ask if the people there would allow us to plant trees there. I think that's pretty good idea. And
I would like to add to that by saying we could do further studies in wind direction movements across the oceans and across different islands, and utilize that information to predict which areas are most likely to be affected by that through utilizing GIS technologies and satellite imagery systems. And by doing this, we can hopefully narrow down specific islands that will be mostly impacted or will be on the way of the carbon emissions, so it can be sequestrated back into the trees through those islands as a proxy instead.
But for like real feasibility, the only way it would work is if you reduce the size of the plant itself, because the scale of emissions, like you said earlier, it would take us, we have to build 4.5, we have to plant 4.5 million trees.
Yeah.
And so like the cost of planting the tree isn't even taken into account, and also there's just not enough room in any island in the Caribbean to fit 4.5 million trees. So essentially it's like you have to reduce the generation potential of the plant itself if you want to suppress carbon for it to make sense.
So can you go back to the LCOE for me real quick? So, of course, like, this is super complicated, like in-depth, like financial stuff, very nice. So in that tax credit structure, like, what do you think is the like most important part for like making this feasible? Like, which incentives do you think for making this like this because like let's say I'm a bank, because all of y'all are asking me for money today, so like let's say I actually have money. What is, if you had like elevator pitch, explain to me like, hey, how can I make this plan? How can you make this plan with my money? Like, shoot.
So in all reality, the only way that this is really feasible for a lot of like carbon capture technology is through an ITC, because in finance, timing is like the biggest thing. And so essentially it's like an ITC you get paid at the end of construction, and you see this is 60% of the equipment. I mean, in Canada, that's 60% of the equipment that was purchased to build a carbon capture plant, which could be billions of dollars. That's a substantial amount of money that's paid at the beginning, before operations. In a 45Q structure, I'll go into a little bit of detail. So basically there's 3 periods during the structure. There's a direct pay period, there's like the terminal period, and then there's an extended period. So the direct pay period is like 5 years. And it usually means that the government pays dollar for dollar for every tax credit you generate. So it's like, you know, it doesn't even really matter if there's carbon markets, you just get a price. And they're like, okay, you generated this tax credit, we're gonna pay you $85 per metric ton. So like those 5 years, you're making a lot of money. After that, you're dependent on pricing. You're dependent on like manufacturers wanting to buy carbon credits, and they buy them at a discount. So basically you need to know is, this happens during operations, this happens during construction. If you're doing things during construction, it has a bigger impact on the project than if you're doing things during operation.
I mean, that's exactly sort of what I was thinking, because especially you're picking geothermal energy, and in geothermal plants, so much of that cost comes into just like the drilling. So it's like you go up front with, you have to put down a ton of money on the table, and it's a gamble. So having like such a huge reduction in that cost, and so making that gamble like less sad, that's huge. Yeah. So really awesome job, guys. That's a good job. Yeah. Any other questions from the audience? No? Cool. Well, good job.
Another view of the audience.
My phone died, so I didn't know one of us.
That's fine. It was good over. So, wait one moment.
Sorry.
So, I'd just like to say, congratulations to all of you on completing Capstone projects. You all did a super good job with research and your presentations. And, it just really shows how much work you can get done in a week. Well, it's really less than a week because you're doing a bunch of other stuff as well. When you get a bunch of like-minded individuals together with diverse backgrounds. And I hope that you all take some lessons from this. Like the golden circle framework is super important. Starting out with why are you doing what you're doing? I feel like so many people go their entire lives just doing things and a lot of times not really considering what's the purpose behind what you do every day. I think that's super important. And yeah, I'm just super proud of all the work that y'all did. So good job. Yeah.
Yay!
Thank you, Rachel and others for Natalie. I really appreciate it. Okay, good job. For that industry.
Dan, how long was our presentation?
I don't know.
You're mad then.
Oh, yeah.
Brandon, did you or did you not speak that loud?